Morning, grade 7 and 8s. Your math for today is basically a continuation of what you've done the last day. So we'll just quickly go over what you learned the last day to make sure everybody's on track. For grade 7s at least, we were looking at common denominators and doing some adding and subtracting of fractions, doing it the proper way. If you look at the note we've attached, we'd look at these things and say, what's the common denominator for the following? So if you'd look at this question, you've got something out of 4 and something out of 5. Most of you now have gotten used to the pattern that basically you multiply 4 by 5 and the denominator for each of these would be 20. So you'd have pieces of 20. Then you'd look at this one and 7 and 8. Again, coming up with the lowest common denominator, you'd be looking for 7 times 8 and you would get your answer for that and you'd have your lowest common denominator. Of course, some of you would look at this question and go, well, it's 3 times 6. The denominator we can use for both is 18. That's correct, that would work. But if you've noticed early, and this is where it's important to know your multiplication facts and know your multiples, 3 would go into 6. So you could leave this fraction all by itself and make this into pieces of 6. And in the end, you'll get the same answer, but if you did it with pieces of 18, you're gonna have to do a lot of simplification in the end. Whereas if you did it with pieces of 6, you'll probably do it once and you'll be finished. So if you look down here, we said use proper form to add and subtract fractions. So you look at this first piece, here was our original question, 9/10 plus 17/20. If you looked at that, all we really have to do is change our tenths to 20ths. So we did that in one line, that's worth 1 mark. So 18 out of 20 and 17 out of 20. Your next mark is adding those pieces to get you 35 pieces out of 20. Then your next mark, of course, would be changing that from a sort of improper fraction into a mixed number and getting 1 and 15/20. And then last but not least, you'd get another mark for reducing your 15/20 to lowest terms and getting 3/4. Okay? So there's a bunch of marks to get in here. This is all proper form. It's getting you used to more complicated fraction work that you'll have to do in high school. Okay, we could do another one here if you really liked. We could look at this and say 7/9 minus 2/5. We'd look and say 9 times 5 gets us pieces of 45. So we'd have something out of 45 and something out of 45. We multiplied 9 by 5 to get 45. So 7 times 5 is 35 pieces of 45. We multiplied 5 by 9 to get 45. So we'd multiply our top number by 9 and we get 18 pieces of 45. Then we'd look at this and say, well, 35 and 18 gets me 45 and 55 if I went to 20, but then I'd take a 2 off because I had 18, and I'd have 53 pieces of 45. Oops, sorry, that's kind of a mess. So 53 pieces of 45. So now we've got a mark here, a mark here. We need to make this into a mixed number. 45 goes into 53 once, and that leaves us a number of pieces left over, which turns out to be 8 pieces of 45. And in this case, that is lowest terms. We are done, and there's our mark. So grade 7s, there's your questions for today with a bunch of practice questions. Notice we do have our end unit test coming soon, so I would recommend you do those and check your answers. Grade 8s, you were looking at dividing fractions using the reciprocals. So really, when we're talking about reciprocal, all you're doing is flipping these numbers over. So what's the reciprocal of 1/3? It's 3 over 1. What's the reciprocal of 4/5? It's 5 over 4. What's the reciprocal of 7? Well, really, 7 is like saying 7 over 1. So the reciprocal of 7 is 1 over 7. Okay. So when we divide fractions using the rule, which is what they will expect you to do in grade 7, 8, yes, there would be in grade 9 and on, there will be no more modeling because the numbers will get too complicated and too large. But if you look at this, basically you change your division. So there's your division question. Your first fraction stays the same. Your second fraction, you give the flip and make into the reciprocal, and you get 2/3 becomes 3 over 2. And you multiply the tops. So 7 times 3 is 21. Bottom, 8 times 2 is 16. That gets you 21/16, and you go, oops, that's an improper fraction. So we make it into 1 and 1 and 5/16. Sorry, we keep getting disturbed by Miss Riddell, but that'll be okay. So then we go into our next one and we say, now you try. We've got 1 and 7/8 divided by 3/5. To do this properly, we'd say 1 times 8 is 8, plus the 7 is 15. So really we have 15 over 8. And we change our second piece. Well, let's do it one step at a time. Divided by 3/5. So I made this into an improper fraction. And then we can flip our second number. So I have 15 over 8. We'll make our reciprocal, which is 5 over 3. and then we'd multiply it out, and we'd say our 15 times 5, which is going to be 75, and that would be over 24. And then we'd go, well, how many times does 24 go into 75? Well, we'd say 24, and then 48 would be our next piece. So that gets us to 3, right? And then you'd continue to do your work until you get your improper fraction, or sorry, your mixed number, and you'd have your answer. Okay? Grade 8s, you have a bunch of practice questions as well. Some of them will be with mixed numbers, and you may wish to convert those first into improper fractions. Others will not. Again, notice that you have a test coming up. We'll have the mid-chapter test coming very soon, and this unit will be finished, and we'll probably be starting with probability. So good luck, everybody. Let us know if you have any questions, and we'll see you soon.